All right, let's take a deep dive into Dutch railways. We got a bunch of articles you sent over, some in Dutch, some in English, and it looks like you want us to break down what's going on with NS and the whole train system in the Netherlands,
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of turmoil recently.
to put it lightly.
Yeah.
So where should we start?
Well, we could start with those FNV strikes that have been all over the news.
Yeah, the strikes. Can you explain who the FNV is and what they're striking about?
Sure, the FNV is the Federation of Dutch Trade Unions, one of the biggest labor unions in the country, and they represent a lot of the rail workers.
Okay.
And they've been clashing with ProRail, the company that manages the rail infrastructure, over wages, basically.
So it's a classic labor dispute.
Yeah, pretty much. The FNV wants a 13% wage increase,
13%.
while ProRail offered 8%. So there's that gap.
That's a pretty big difference. I mean, why is there such a big gap? Is ProRail just being difficult?
Well, they're saying they have financial constraints, rising maintenance costs and all that.
Ah, so they're pleading poverty, essentially.
In a way, yeah. But what's interesting is that the FNV is tying their 13% demand to the current inflation rate.
So they're just trying to keep up with the rising cost of living.
Exactly.
Right.
Which makes ProRail's 8% offer a real problem for workers. It'd be a pay cut in reality. And that's why the FNV organized those rolling strikes in November, targeting traffic control posts during rush hour, causing quite the disruption.
Oh, I bet. And I'm seeing here that the public is pretty divided about these strikes. I mean, it's all over these Dutch articles.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot button issue. Some people totally get where the workers are coming from, especially with prices going up so much. But others are just fed up with the inconvenience. It messes up their day.
And these strikes seem to be just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to people being unhappy with NS. These sources are overflowing with complaints, delays, cancellations, how clean the trains are. It's everything.
Yeah, and it's been building up for a while, this frustration.
Yeah.
This isn't just about the strikes. There are deeper issues that are making people lose trust in the whole system.
Like, what kind of deeper issues? Spill the tea.
Well, one thing is the age of the Dutch rail network.
It's old.
Yeah, it's getting old, and it's struggling to handle the growing population and more people using the trains. We see that in the frequent technical issues and breakdowns. Remember that incident with the broken overhead line at Amsterdam-Duivendrecht?
Oh, yeah. The Duivendrecht debacle. That messed things up big time.
Yeah.
Why was that such a big deal, technically speaking?
Good question. You see, the Dutch rail network is all interconnected like a lot of European systems. So when something like an overhead line breaks at a busy junction like Duivendrecht, it causes a domino effect. Trains get backed up, schedules are thrown out the window. It takes forever to get things sorted.
It's chaos.
Total chaos. And if I recall correctly, they had to evacuate passengers from a train. It must have been pretty wild.
It was all over the news. And what's worse is that it took them ages to figure out what caused the overhead line to break in the first place. That says a lot about how tough it is to maintain and repair an aging infrastructure.
Right. So they're always playing catch up, putting out fires instead of addressing the root cause.
That's a good way to put it. And that reactive approach is going to make the problem even worse in the long run. If they keep letting the infrastructure deteriorate, we're going to see more of these breakdowns, and they'll be even more disruptive.
So Duivendrecht wasn't just a random thing. It was a sign of a much bigger problem.
Exactly. And the sources keep hammering this point home. The Dutch rail network is vulnerable, especially during peak hours or when something unexpected happens.
Get it?
Yeah.
But it's not just about the tracks and wires, right? What about all those complaints about ticket prices and the cost of using the trains?
Ah, yes. Another sore spot for passengers. NS has been hiking up ticket prices pretty regularly.
I've noticed. It's understandable that people are frustrated, especially when the service isn't getting any better. You mentioned some interesting things about how the Dutch ticketing system works compared to the German one. Something about a Deutschland ticket.
Right. The Deutschland ticket. It's this flat-rate ticket that lets you travel on regional trains all over Germany for a fixed monthly price. Seems like a good deal.
Yeah, it's been a hit over there. People love how simple and affordable it is. And it makes you wonder why the Dutch system is so complicated. I'm looking at your notes here. All these different subscriptions, peak and off-peak travel. It's a nightmare.
Tell me about it. I need a spreadsheet just to figure out the cheapest way to get to work.
It's a pain, right? This complex system might seem flexible, but it's confusing and often expensive, especially if you use the train a lot. And you found some stuff about regional German tickets too, right? Like the Berlin AB card and the Bayern ticket.
Oh, yeah, those. They seem way cheaper if you're just traveling within a specific region.
It seems like they've got some things figured out over there. And then there's that job ticket thing where employers help pay for their employees' commute.
Oh, right, that. That could be a game changer here.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea that could help make things more affordable for commuters and encourage more people to ditch their cars.
So we're looking at a multi-layered problem here.
Mm.
It's not just strikes, infrastructure, or ticket prices. It's all tangled up. The strikes are just adding fuel to the fire of public frustration, which is already high because of the disruptions and rising costs. And all of this is happening while the infrastructure is crumbling around them.
It's a perfect storm, that's for sure.
A perfect storm indeed. And one that could have big consequences for the Dutch economy, the environment, and everyday people's lives. But I think we need to save that conversation for part 2 of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
And we're back for part 2 of our deep dive into the Dutch railway system. Last time we were talking about FNV strikes, old infrastructure, and that crazy ticketing system. And it's clear that things are a bit messy, to say the least. Yeah, a bit messy is putting it lightly. There's a lot more to unpack here.
All right then, unpack away.
Well, one of the main things that jumps out from all these articles is that this isn't just a few random things going wrong.
Right.
There's a much bigger problem here. Not enough investment and putting off maintenance for years.
Kind of like what we were talking about with that whole Duivendrecht mess.
Exactly. When you keep patching things up instead of fixing them properly, you're just delaying the inevitable.
Avoiding the problem until it becomes a bigger problem.
Right. And in this case, that means more breakdowns, more disruptions, and the service just keeps getting worse.
And tougher to pinpoint what went wrong in the first place.
Exactly. And to make things even more complicated, the Dutch rail network is all interconnected. So when one thing goes wrong, it can trigger a chain reaction across the whole system.
It's like that old saying, for want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. And for want of a horse, the rider was lost.
Exactly. And because it's all so interconnected, they really need to tackle this underinvestment problem head on. Otherwise, it's just going to be one breakdown after another.
And these breakdowns aren't just annoying, are they?
No, they have real economic consequences.
Right. When trains are delayed or canceled, it affects everything.
Yeah.
Businesses, tourism, people getting to work or school on time.
Exactly. The economic cost of a rail system that doesn't work is huge.
Okay, so we've got this underinvestment problem. Where do we go from here? How do we fix it? Didn't the articles mention some potential solutions?
They did. But there's no easy fix here. It's going to take a multi-pronged approach, addressing both the immediate issues and the root causes.
Okay, break it down for us. What are some concrete things they could do?
Well, the most obvious one is to invest more in infrastructure. I'm not just talking about quick fixes,
Right.
but a long-term strategy to modernize, expand capacity, and focus on preventative maintenance.
Sounds good, but we know from the sources that ProRail is strapped for cash. Where's the money going to come from?
That's the million-euro question. And it's a hot topic in the government. Some people say the government needs to step in with more subsidies. Others say NS and ProRail should find ways to be more efficient and cut costs.
So it's a political football.
Definitely. And that's where the politics of Dutch railways get really interesting.
You mentioned earlier that politics plays a big role here. How so?
Well, like we said, there's the funding issue, which involves the national government, regional authorities, and even the EU.
Right.
Then you have all these different stakeholders, each with their own agendas. You have the unions fighting for their members, passenger groups pushing for affordable and reliable service, and the rail industry itself lobbying for money and less regulation.
So it's like a tug of war.
Pretty much. And it often leads to deadlock and slow progress, which makes the problems even worse.
But it's not all bad news, right? The sources did mention some potential solutions, and surely there must be some common ground among these different groups.
Of course. And I think that's the key takeaway here. Everyone needs to work together and compromise. For the Dutch railway system to truly get back on track, all these stakeholders need to come together and find solutions that benefit everyone.
Sounds good in theory, but how do you make that happen in reality? It seems like a Herculean task to get all these groups with different interests to agree on anything.
It is tough, but not impossible. One way is to make the decision-making process more transparent and inclusive so that everyone has a seat at the table from the beginning.
So everyone gets a say.
Exactly. And if everyone feels like they have a stake in the process, they're more likely to support the outcome.
Makes sense. But it's not just about process, is it? There also needs to be a willingness to compromise and think outside the box, right?
Absolutely. The sources even suggested exploring new funding models like public-private partnerships, which could bring in more investment.
Yeah, and we talked about those German ticketing models like the Deutschland ticket and the job ticket concept.
Yeah.
They could try adapting those for the Netherlands.
Exactly. They need to be open to new ideas and learn from other countries.
So what we're seeing here is that they need a whole new way of thinking about and managing the Dutch railway system. It's not just about fixing broken tracks or buying new trains. It's about creating a system that's sustainable, resilient, and puts passengers first.
Exactly. They need to think long term, invest in preventative maintenance, embrace innovation, and above all, put the passengers' needs first.
You've given us a lot to think about. It's clear that the problems facing Dutch railways are complex, but there's also hope that with the right approach, they can turn things around.
It's a crucial time for the Dutch railway system. The choices they make now will have a huge impact on millions of people.
That's something for our listener to think about as they navigate the world of Dutch trains. But before we wrap things up, there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to look at: the passengers themselves. Let's dive into that in the final part of our deep dive. Stick with us. We're back for the final part of our deep dive into Dutch railways. We've talked about strikes, infrastructure problems, ticketing systems, and even the politics behind it all.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. But before we wrap up, I think we need to talk about something we haven't really touched on yet. Us, the passengers.
Ah, yes, the passengers. We often think of ourselves as just along for the ride, but we actually play a big role in how the railway system works.
How do we fit into all of this?
Well, our choices have a big impact. The way we choose to travel, how often we travel, even what time of day we travel, it all affects how much demand there is on the system.
So if more people chose to use public transportation, it could actually lead to positive change.
Exactly. More passengers means more money for NS and ProRail, and that money can be used to improve infrastructure, make the service better, and maybe even lower fares in the long run.
It's a win-win. But let's be real. With all the problems we've been talking about, the delays, the cancellations, the high prices, it's easy to see why people might not want to take the train.
Right. It can be frustrating. But that's where passenger advocacy comes in.
Passenger advocacy.
Yeah. When passengers are informed and engaged, they can put pressure on NS and the government to make things better.
So it's about working together to make a change.
Exactly. Passenger advocacy groups can raise awareness about problems, lobby for policy changes, and hold the rail operators accountable.
And you found some examples of this working in the Netherlands and other countries, right?
I did. Passengers have organized petitions, protests, even legal challenges. There are all sorts of ways to make your voice heard.
And with social media, it's even easier for people to connect and get their message out there.
Definitely, social media is a powerful tool for sharing information, organizing campaigns, and putting pressure on those in charge.
So it's not just about ranting on Twitter. It's about using it strategically to make a real difference.
Right. And passenger advocacy isn't just about complaining. It's also about offering solutions and working with the rail operators to find ways to improve things.
So it's about being part of the solution, not just pointing out the problem.
Exactly. But I get it. It can be hard to stay motivated when you're constantly dealing with delays and frustrations. How do you keep that momentum going?
Good question.
I think it comes down to the passion and dedication of individual passengers. People who really want to see a better railway system are willing to put in the time and effort to make it happen.
They're turning that frustration into positive action.
Exactly. And when enough people feel that way, they can really make a difference.
This has been a truly insightful deep dive into Dutch railways. We've looked at the challenges, the potential solutions, and even the role that we, the passengers, can play in shaping the future of the system.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
But before we go, what's the one thing you want our listener to take away from all of this?
I want them to remember that they have power as a passenger. Their choices, their voice, their actions, it all matters. Whether it's choosing the train whenever possible, joining a passenger advocacy group, or just sharing their experiences and ideas, they can help create a better railway system for everyone.
That's a great message to end on. And with that, we want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Dutch railways. We hope you learned something new, maybe even felt inspired to get involved. Remember, the future of the railway system is in our hands. Let's work together to make it a good one.